The Banyan Tree is a documentary film series on India aimed at laying a base of key facts and information and to clear the air of misconception. In the Beginning, the first of a 20-part series, will trace human origins and some early civilizations in the subcontinent. It will look primarily at the migrations of people within India, their interaction with outsiders, and their increasing heterogeneity. "225 million years ago, all the world was joined together in what was named Pangaea, meaning all lands in Greek. At that time, what is now India lay between Africa and present-day Antarctica and Australia. About 200 million years ago, Pangaea split into two, Laurasia and Gondwana land. This phenomenon is known as plate tectonics. Then, 20 million years later, Gondwana land broke up further, and the Indian, Antarctic, and Australian plates drifted away across the sea. The Indian plate moved up through the Sea of Thetis and collided with Laurasia at what is now Tibet. This collision took place about 50 million years ago. And this was India in the beginning. The collision was to form the highest mountain range in the world, the Himalaya. The Indian plate kept moving, sliding under the softer Tibetan mainland and causing it to fold upwards. The Himalaya are still rising at a majestically slow yet strong pace of the Earth's macro timescale, at an average of half a centimeter a year. The simplistic assumption that the original Indians came from Africa because of the earlier land connection between Africa and India is incorrect. The human story would evolve tens of millions of years after the continents had separated. It was only about 100,000 years ago that the new and powerful species, modern humans, as we recognize them, emerged in India. Professor D.K. Bhattacharya, an anthropologist, formerly with Delhi University, gives us more insights.
The genus Homo, which is the first genus of our kind, was recorded from Africa in 1.8 million years ago. This is called Homo erectus. Subsequently, we have found a Homo, a member of a Homo erectus in Narmada from around 100,000 years. So there is no doubt that this Homo arrived from out of Africa. But the fact remains that we have a fossil kind which is the earliest form of ancestral hominids, and they are from the Sivaliks in northwest India, which is around 8 to 10 million years years ago.
Dr. Vashisht, professor of paleoanthropology in the Punjab University, has extensively studied the fossil deposits found in the Shivalik mountains.
And we are particularly located in the upper Shivaliks in the northeast of Chandigarh. The very famous site of Haritaliangar is about say 200 kilometers from this particular place. These Shivalik deposits, they extend for a distance of nearly 2400 kilometers, starting from the base of Afghanistan down to Burma and running all along the foothills of the central axis of the Himalayas.
Pre-humans of an early date have been found in other parts of the world, such as Peking man in China and Java man in Indonesia. A key pre-human found in India was Narmada man.
The most significant find that has come from the Indian subcontinent or from India particularly is from the Narmada basin. And this is the skull cap, you see, which was discovered from the Narmada basin by Arun Sunakia of the Geological Survey of India. And this is also described as the Homo erectus narmadaensis. Although it belongs to the main genus, that is the Homo erectus, but a subspecies named Narmadensis has been assigned to this.
Interestingly, the word man has been used in the generic sense because, according to some experts, Narmada man was actually a female, about 30 years old and very short in stature. There are two major theories about human origins. The first is that humans came from a single source in Africa and then migrated to other parts of the world, replacing all archaic pre-human species. This is popularly called the African Eve theory. Paleoanthropologist A.R. Sankhyan, with the Anthropological Survey of India, explains the second or multi-regional theory.
There is another group of experts who maintain that Homo sapiens, they have evolved from Homo erectus, and Homo erectus evolved to first archaic Homo sapiens, they subsequently to anatomically modern Homo sapiens from the regionally existing species. And this theory is known as multi-regional theory, and it goes in line with the Darwinian gradualism.
A majority of experts today support the African Eve theory. Professor Partho Majumdar, who heads the Human Genetics Unit of the Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, states,
"It is now widely accepted that modern humans evolved in Africa, migrated out of Africa and replaced archaic humans in other parts of the world. And one of the first waves of out of Africa migration came into India. India therefore served as a major corridor for dispersal of modern humans."
Which of these theories is the correct one? And which one will be turned on its head when new evidence is found? Only time will tell. An hour's drive from Bhopal, capital of Madhya Pradesh, at the foothills of the Vindhya mountains are the Bhimbetka caves. Here we find clear evidence at several levels of early people who were hunters and gatherers. Discovered in 1957 by Dr. V.S. Vakankar, Bhimbetka is one of the largest and richest cave-dwelling sites in Asia. This complex of Stone Age caves shows that humans were in occupation over thousands of years. A variety of paintings and drawings adorn the walls, from the earliest portraits of animals to lively scenes of daily life. Even as Bhimbetka continued to be inhabited, one of the world's earliest urban civilizations emerged, stretching from western and northern India till the borders of Iran. This was the Harappan or the Indus Valley civilization. The Indus civilization covered more than 500,000 square kilometers and had only a few contemporaries of the same scale in the world: Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and the Chinese. The first Indus city to be discovered was Harappa, followed by Mohenjo-daro, and many others in present-day Pakistan. After the partition in 1947, extensive excavations were carried out in India, and hundreds of sites were found. In the 1960s, a significant discovery was made when Dholavira, a classic Indus city, was located. It was in the 90s that the full significance of Dholavira was realized when it was excavated. It now ranks amongst the 5 largest of the Indus cities. As we make our way from Bhuj in Gujarat to Dholavira on Kader Bet, an island surrounded by the desolate and remote run of Kutch, we wonder why the people of this civilization chose such an inhospitable and parched terrain. A major part of the run is a marsh of salt which was earlier a shallow sea. After all, other Indus cities were located along rivers. Dr. Bisht of the Archaeological Survey of India, who was responsible for excavating Dholavira, gives us some answers.
On one side, Kutch is the Arabian Sea. On two sides are the Great Run and the Little Run. On the third is the Gulf of Kutch, and the fourth is Korik Creek. And we know that Hadappans were maritime people. They were manufacturing people, trading people, and maritime people. And we also know that they have a long distance trade across the sea with northern part of Oman Peninsula, Bahrain, Failaka, Mesopotamia, and also with the southern part of Iran also.
Dholavira has impressive fortifications. It was in 3 levels, unlike most Indus cities which have only 2. The upper or the highest section, where the citadel is located, was perhaps for the ruling authority.
For the first time we found outer fortification. And inside we found 3 major divisions: citadel, middle town and lower town. Citadel has 2 parts, what we call castle and bailey. Of course, citadel is so small in dimensions, we can very well say that it was meant for one ruling authority. I don't think he was sharing that area with other functionaries of his state. And middle town was certainly for the elite people, for administrators, for rich merchants, for important persons. And lower town was possibly certainly for the common man.
One of the most impressive aspects of Dholavira are the water reservoirs. Extending like an inner moat around the city, they serve the twin purposes of supplying water and protecting the settlement. A continuing feature of Dholavira's planning was to ensure that water from rain and rivulets was stored or diverted through an elaborate system of dams and underground channels connected to the reservoirs. From statuettes, figurines and other finds, we're able to get an idea of how these ancient people dressed, their hairstyles and their accessories. An intriguing feature of the Indus civilization are the thousands of seals found at the sites. Made mostly of soft white stone, these seals indicate that the Harappans had one of the earliest writing systems in the world, with over 400 letters. This writing is yet to be deciphered. Also, exquisitely depicted are animal, human and plant life. The seals could have been identity markers for individuals and used for trading purposes. But more evidence of a writing system has been found at Dholavira.
One of the significant contributions of Dholavira has been the find of a large-sized inscription having 10 signs, each signs of large Harappan letters. It is my firm belief that it was a very important sort of signboard for the city or for the ruling family or for their faith, something we do not know. Must be spotted on the facade, very impressive facade of the North Gate, which is the most exquisite, most elaborate gate complex at Dholavira.
Some claim it as a precursor to Sanskrit, an Indo-Aryan language. Others say it is the original Dravidian language. Scholars are still debating these and other claims. Once the script is deciphered, it will give us a clue to the Indus people's identity. The Indus people disposed of their dead in a variety of ways. The simplicity of the Indus burials and absence of rich and elaborate trappings has led to conjectures that there was no royalty. Although the citadel was evidently meant for a ruling authority, perhaps a religious or temporal council of leading citizens.
In most cases, it was believed that they were burying their dead. But at the same time, we find many of the graves, even at Harappa or even at Kalibanga, were without skeletons. Grave goods were there, A structure, some sort of structure was there, but there was no skeleton. On the contrary, at Dholavira, most of the graves are devoid of skeletons. It means they have already switched over to other mode of disposal of the dead. The most likely is cremation.
Interestingly, the village which adjoins Dholavira today is also an example of a mixed population. The dead are disposed of by the Hindus in a variety of ways, sometimes by burial or sometimes by cremation, as do most Hindus in India. But mixed practices have always been a significant feature of Indian culture. The Indus civilization, like other such great civilizations, was to disappear. Was this disappearance gradual or sudden? Crude structures, which are inferior in their finish and scale, dating to 1500 BC, have been found superimposed over the older Dholavira. Just as Mesopotamia declined because of a loss in trade, a plausible theory is that the Indus economy became unsustainable, that people moved out in search of better things. The situation might have been worsened by disease, occasional flood, and earthquake. Gradually, the civilization crumbled and was ruralized. Around 1500 BC, after the decline of the Indus civilization, small-scale migrations were taking place from Central Asia. Some of the migrants spoke an Indo-European language which developed into what came to be known as Indo-Aryan. These people were later popularly called Aryan, though this nomenclature gives rise to many misconceptions.
Regarding the word Aryan, we need to be a little careful. Apparently, it has been fed by the British writers with a different kind of a meaning, and mostly the weight of the meaning was on the race. But as we understand it today, of course, a huge amount of literature of research has appeared since then, and we are quite sure that they were not a single race, number one. This is a language speaker of a specific cultural mosaic, not even a single culture, which did not come as a small invading group, but in waves after waves from somewhere in Central Asia. It is quite likely the one wave came from Central Asia, the other came from Iran. But we have a conglomerate term called Aryans to put it as a blanket issue of the outside invaders, which is basically wrong.
Dr. Kumkum Roy, an historian from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, supports this theory.
The Aryans, as far as one can see, probably came from Central Asia because there have been a whole lot of ideas about where the original homeland would have been. Also, in terms of the landscape that one has in Proto-Indo-European, which has been reconstructed by linguists, it seems as if Central Asia was the homeland. They probably came sometime during the 2nd millennium BC as a language-speaking group. It's not a racial term. And I'd like to emphasize that even if you look at the earliest textual traditions that we have, the Rig Veda and the subsequent kind of textual traditions, it does seem to be a language-speaking group rather than a racial group. And these are people who identify themselves as Aryans because they have distinctive ritual practices, because they follow a distinctive social system.
There is an unsubstantiated belief that the Aryans were always in India and were in fact the Indus people. The Aryans are credited with bringing the horse with them, but a few horse toys found in Indus excavations only indicates a possible later interaction, and the fact remains that the horse is unrepresented on the Indus seals. The newcomers' process of adapting to the habitat was gradual and defined by the links they forged with indigenous populations.
They were not agriculturists, they were agro-pastoralists. They brought bronze with them. In one of the earliest movement, they brought bronze. But slowly, as one after another these waves started coming, they started penetrating further east and went as far as Allahabad in the east, and that's the time they brought iron. So one of the last of the waves brought iron. No civilization can survive without having acceptability of the indigenous population. And here comes a group of invaders occupying pasture land and beautiful alluvial plains. And the indigenous people, who must have been speaking a range of Dravidian languages, had to be introduced as a labor group, suppliers group, and so on. So a symbiotic relation sets in, and that brings a cultural contact. Perhaps even marriages started taking place, otherwise Manu would not have talked of Anuloma and Pratiloma. So this is the way the relationship grew and culture made contact.
The Dravidian speakers moved to the southern peninsular region, which they now inhabit. The confluence of peoples resulting in the various migrations over the centuries gave rise to remarkable phenomena. The Vedic literature arose in the north, couched in a language which would acquire classical status, while in the south, a classical literature was being created in Tamil. Vedic Sanskrit and the seeds of what is now called Hinduism took root and manifested over the centuries in deep philosophies and colorful local expression. Great thinkers emerged, such as Mahavira, who founded the Jain religion, and the Buddha in the 6th century BC. Enlightened or powerful empires were established, both of indigenous people and outsiders, such as the Mauryans, the Satavahanas, the Kushans, the Guptas, the Pallavas, and the Cholas, among others. Emperor Ashoka propagated ideas of peace unheard of till then. The people pioneered new systems of knowledge, governance, medicine, and mathematics. They performed brilliant feats in literature, the arts, and architecture.
I think one of the elements that contributes to the greatness of any civilization is diversity and heterogeneity, because for something to be really great, it has to be comprehensive and include very different strands within it. And how these strands are held together varies from one context to another, but definitely that is something that goes into the making of what we identify as the great civilizations.
From Chandigarh, which lies on the foothills of the Shivaliks, we head towards the great plains of Punjab to Sanghol, some 40 kilometers away. On the surface, this village and its surrounding areas give little indication of historical significance, but archaeologists have found evidence of settlements dating from 2000 BC. The key discoveries in Sanghol are the remains of a Buddhist stupa and monastery in a chakra or circular form dating to about the 1st century AD. This was the period of the Kushans, who came from Central Asia and ruled for a few centuries in India. The Kushans became Buddhists, and Sanghol must have been a monastic center during that time. They were most likely followed by the Gupta dynasty, which made Sanghol into a provincial capital. In 1984, archaeologists discovered a trench carefully packed with over 100 exquisitely carved railing pillars meant for a stupa. These Kushan carvings must have been hidden away because of the fear of raids, and the raiders would have been the Hunas, who poured in from the north and west and rampaged through the countryside, destroying monasteries and cities during the 5th century AD. The Hunas were eventually driven out, but some of them stayed back, and historians connect them to the powerful Gurjari dynasty of later times. Sanghol declined in the medieval period and was deserted from the 13th century till Mughal times. Delhi too is a prime example of varied habitation, but on a much grander scale. Excavations inside the old fort or Purana Killa indicate continuous occupation from the 3rd century BC till medieval times, though archaeologists deny the romantic theory that this site was once Indraprastha, the capital of the Pandavas of the epic the Mahabharata. Various Muslim dynasties originating from Afghanistan, Arabia, Turkey, Central Asia built forts and palaces in and around Delhi. In the 16th century, Babur, who was born in Russian Turkestan, founded the Mughal Empire by defeating Ibrahim Lodhi and conquering Delhi. During the Mughal dynasty, some of India's finest monuments were built. The British colonial power rose as the Mughals declined. They ruled from Kolkata, the capital of British India. In 1911, George V announced the transfer of the capital to Delhi. The quiet, spacious new capital of the British, a direct contrast to the crowded alleyways of the walled city of Shah Jahanabad, was formally inaugurated in 1931. In the south of India, the influx of foreign rule was much less, and till a later date, the southern dynasties were largely indigenous. But this peninsular region, with its long coastline, had been trading with foreign lands from ancient times. Apart from Mesopotamia, there was trade with the Romans, Greeks, Jews, and Arabs. In most of Southeast Asia, traders from South India forged close trade and cultural links. Hinduism and Buddhism made a deep impression on these areas, and evidence of cultural and religious influences are clear to this day. With this exchange from east and west, there were inevitably cross-migrations which affected the composition of the people. Exchanges between South and North India too continued.
After the initial encounter, there seem to have been movements throughout the subcontinent, not necessarily always from north to south, but in other directions as well. Some of these movements were probably in search of various kinds of economic resources. It could have been agricultural land, also trade seems to have been a motivating factor. Sometimes you have groups of warriors moving from north to south and vice versa.
We traveled to Kanchipuram in the southern state of Tamil Nadu, a place of pilgrimage and the center of a rich silk weaving tradition. Kanchipuram dates from the 2nd century AD and can be taken as an important microcosm of complex religious developments in early India. It is one of the 7 holy places of the Hindus, and successive dynasties made it their capital. The great medieval philosopher, the Adi Shankaracharya from Kerala, was said to have lived here. Shankaracharya's austere philosophy, based on the Vedic tradition, was meant to counter the strong Jain and Buddhist following which had built up in the region. This influence is, even today, felt up to the furthest north of India in the high Himalayas. Later, the personal god cults became more popular, and Shiva and Vishnu and his incarnations became the focus of worship. The Kailash Nath temple, built early in the 7th century, is one of the most beautiful of the early Shiva temples in the city. The majority of Indians are Hindu, the religion which grew within the country from the earliest times. The largest minority are Muslims, the result of long periods of Muslim dynastic rule and traveling Sufi mystics. The Muslims are settled across the subcontinent, converts from among the local people, or settlers who came in from outside. The Muslims and Hindus have enriched each other's cultures, though there have been outbursts of extreme violence and conflict. The creation of Pakistan and Bangladesh, both Muslim-majority nations, is a result of this. Buddhism, Jainism and Sikhism are religions which originated in India and continue to have a following with a rich culture. There have been Christians in India since the 1st century AD, though the main impetus came with conversions by missionaries who followed the Portuguese, French, Dutch and British colonialists. The Parsis arrived in Gujarat from Persia in the 8th century and are followers of their ancestral religion, Zoroastrianism. There are also the Jews, though numbering only a few thousand in the country. There is much speculation about the original inhabitants of India. The conjecture is that the Adivasis may be what their name indicates, the first people in India.
It is generally accepted that the tribal people who constitute over 8% of the total population are the original inhabitants of India. There are an estimated 461 tribal communities in India.
A short flight from Kolkata brings us to the state of Manipur, which is considered to be the gateway to Southeast Asia. The people of Manipur consist of the Meiteis, who are the largest group. The other dominant people are the Nagas and the Kukis. We meet historian Gangumai Kamai inside the Kangla fort, the ancient capital of Manipur. Professor Kamai has studied the ethnic composition of Manipur closely and tells us about the origins of the Meiteis.
The origin of the Meiteis has been widely studied subject. One view was, and I think it is mostly accepted, is they are Tibeto-Burmans and they had migrated from southwest China in different periods of history, most probably to 2nd or 3rd century, 3rd millennium BC. They came to Upper Burma and base by base they had come down to Manipur Valley, and the Meitei nationality, the community was evolved in the valley of Manipur. According to the Royal Chronicle, the present ruling dynasty of Manipur started their reign from the 1st century. So they are known as Ningthauja dynasty. But in the 18th century, when these Mughals are declining, then there is a lot of pressure that Hindus in northeast should try to reinvigorate. At that time, the Hindu missionaries from Bengal mostly, they came to Manipur and they converted the king of Manipur named Sarai Rongba.
But it was under his son, nicknamed Garib Nawaz, who ruled in the 18th century, that Vaishnavism, a sect of Hinduism, was declared the state religion. While we were in Manipur, the 276th Puya Maithaba Commemoration Day was taking place. It was to remember and protest the conversion of the Meiteis to Hinduism.
At that time there was a conflict with the established Brahmins who are members of the Brahma Sabha of the Maharaja of Manipur. After 50 years or so now, everybody has come to senses that yes, the Meitei Hindus can still follow the Sanami religion. Sanami religion can also follow because India is a secular state. So they are living side by side. Here, behind me, it is the ancient, what's called this shrine of Lord Pakhangba, the royal deity of Manipur. Both Hindu Meiteis and Sanami Meiteis, they worship here.
This short account of Hinduism in Manipur brings out some interesting features about the Indian caste system. The Meiteis were inducted mostly into the Kshatriya or warrior caste. From Vedic times, Hindu society was divided into 4 groups: the Brahmin, the priestly class, the Kshatriya, nobles and warriors, the Vaishya, cultivators and traders, and the Shudra, lower occupations and servants. Castes therefore indicated occupations within an hierarchy, When other groups, tribes or jatis were encountered, they were sometimes incorporated into Hinduism. A whole group would therefore be assigned a caste according to its prevalent occupations and status. The Meiteis, being a warrior clan, were given Kshatriya status. Bengali and Assamese are the dominant cultures of the region, and the Meiteis began using the Bengali script for their language, though they had a script of their own said to be quite ancient. Now the Meitei script has been revived and is the official script of the state. Meitei society is male-oriented, but one can't help but notice the self-confidence and strength of the women. We are in the traditional Ima market, said to have been founded in 1580. The market is run entirely by women and stall spaces are inherited. The Ima market, which is the hub of life in Imphal, is the largest example of many such markets, showing how women control Manipur's internal trade. From Imphal, we arrive in Kohima, capital of the neighboring state of Nagaland. Composed of 16 tribes, the Nagas are believed to have migrated to these parts through Myanmar from their original homes further east. The Nagas speak languages of the Tibeto-Burman family. In the past, Naga tribes were isolated from one another and spoke different languages. But today, the Naga lingua franca is Nagamese, a mixture of Assamese and Bengali. English is the official language of the state, though few Nagas understand it. In earlier times, Nagas were headhunters, and as the villages remained hostile to one another, they were heavily fortified. We see remnants of this fortification in the Angami Naga village of Kigwema. Built on a steep hill for defensive reasons, Kigwema has an outer gate and would have been surrounded by a fortified wall. Up the slope is the intricately carved inner gate, which now lies abandoned. All around Kigwema are steep slopes carefully chiseled into fields. The Nagas, who are mostly agriculturalists, traditionally cultivate land by the highly unsustainable slash and burn or jhoom method. Attempts are now being made to find alternatives to this practice. Ethnic and tribal identity are an important feature of the Naga dress. The colors and design are distinct for each tribe. The majority of Nagas were converted to Christianity in the 19th century by foreign missionaries. As in Manipur, there is a move to return to older Naga traditions. But again, as with Hinduism in Manipur, Christianity is now rooted in the culture and beliefs of the people. The Nagas consider themselves a unique people, distinct from other peoples of India. For decades, they have been demanding a greater and independent Nagaland through an armed struggle. Since 1997, there has been a ceasefire and negotiations are in progress with the central government. we leave Nagaland to travel far across India to another picturesque and mountainous region. This time to the Nilgiris, or the Blue Mountains of the Western Ghats. From Ooty in Tamil Nadu, we take the road to Kunda Kotagiri, one of the 7 Kota villages. The Kotas number only 1,000 or so and are the only traditional artisan community of the Nilgiris of metalsmiths, carpenters and potters. They craft their own accessories, and while they do not embroider or stitch their own clothes, both men and women wear a simple yet distinct attire, the Kota shawl, intrinsic to their identity. Women have a distinct hairstyle which they must follow after puberty. The religious beliefs of the Kotas are a combination of their own traditional gods with the Hindu god Shiva and his consort Parvati. Proud of their beliefs, the Kotas have resisted attempts at conversion. The Kota villages have 30 to 60 houses which are divided into streets in what is called the Keri system. Marriage between families of the same street or Keri is strictly prohibited. The Kotas are known for their dancing and music, and there is a chasteness in their adherence to the traditional forms. The pace of their dance is slow and measured, but gradually gains in momentum. One hears that on festive occasions, the tempo considerably heats up. The Kotas are meat eaters and particularly enjoy buffalo meat, a culinary habit which separates them from another tribe of the Nilgiris, the Todas, who are vegetarians. Legend has it that the Kotas were disinherited by the Todas when they were found eating meat. Since then, they have lived in separate villages and follow their own particular customs and traditions. In the village of Tarnamund, we find the Todas, also numbering about 1,000 in all. Traditionally a pastoral people with a milk culture, the Todas have only recently taken to agriculture. The Todas have their own temples, distinct in form and style, and the object of veneration is a milk container. Shiva is also worshipped. There has always been speculation about Toda origins. Although their language has been classified as Dravidian, the cadences to an untuned ear are remarkably unlike Dravidian languages. Their half-barrel-shaped houses and long ringlets have led to exotic theories of a possible Western origin, anywhere between Rome and Sumeria. This has never been substantiated. It is natural that deep traces have been left by this melange of cultures and civilizations. The Indian people are a heterogeneous mix and have reflected and absorbed the swirling currents of invaders, traders, pilgrims, missionaries and settlers. Except for Africa, India has more genetic diversity than other comparable regions. The country seethes with contradictions. Both religious and ethnic aspirations sometimes result in violence. Yet India has now emerged as a viable political unit. The answer lies in the country's post-independence democratic tradition, which is demanded as a right by the people of the country.